Discover the incredible life of a hidden servant in a medieval castle. Transformative stories revealed. Emily Carson stood in the dimly lit basement of the Maplewood Library, surrounded by the forgotten echoes of history. Unruly shelves sagged beneath the weight of dust-covered boxes, and she felt an unshakable weight pressing on her chest. She had always loved the comfort of books, their scent of aged paper like the warm embrace of a well-worn blanket. But here, miles from sunlight and surrounded by crumbling relics, she felt adrift, stuck in a quiet life with dreams slipping further away. The sound of her mother's voice reverberated in her mind, reminding her that stability trumped unfulfilled artistic ambitions. As she rummaged through a pile of neglected artifacts, her fingers brushed against something odd, a book, thick and mysterious. She pulled it out, its leather cover cracked, and as she blew off the dust, the world around her shifted. Inside lay a collection of letters chronicling the life of Clara, a servant in a medieval castle. The rawness of Clara's struggle resonated within Emily. Clara's fight against a harsh class system stirred something deep inside Emily, awakening suppressed yearnings for a life beyond the shelves. With each letter, Emily found herself becoming Clara. As the servant faced betrayal and hardship, so too did Emily confront her ongoing battle against her boss's dismissive remarks and the mounting pressure of her family's expectations. Bills piled high, and the weight of a stable career pressed down hard. Clara's defiance against societal norms echoed Emily's own frustrations and insecurities. Before she could stop herself, she began to write words flowing like a torrent, fueled by Clara's fierce resilience. Suddenly, everything she had avoided emerged, her internal critic growing louder, sowing seeds of doubt. What if no one cared about the story? What if her audience couldn't see Clara's journey as a reflection of their own struggles? Emily's mind raced with questions, flickering like candle flames in a heavy breeze. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. With the local library's reading night approaching, Emily stood at a crossroads, facing an engulfing storm of anxiety. She longed to bring Clara's story to life, but feared the judgment of those who had always seen her as nothing more than a desk-bound librarian. The snickers of doubt from colleagues invaded her thoughts like an unwelcome shadow. There was a difference between reading a story and sharing it, especially when that story was one of liberation. As she prepared for the reading, the weight of uncertainty gripped her, muscles tense, breath shallow. Clara's lessons paraded through her mind, locking horns with her crippling self-doubt. Every inch closer to the mic felt like wading deeper into a raging river of possibilities. Would she surrender to her fears, letting them drown her ambitions, or break free and honor Clara's unyielding spirit? Would she reclaim her narrative? With a steely determination fighting off the doubt, Emily squared her shoulders, heart racing against the impending moment. Standing backstage, she felt the arena of possibility a tether to Clara's fierce legacy. The lights dimmed, casting her into darkness, her resolve solidifying. The air thickened, walls vibrating with unspoken words. Who am I, if not for this moment? As the lights faded further, she prepared to uncover the fierce truth held between the pages, unsure if she could share Clara's tale without losing herself. As the spotlight flickered to life, illuminating the space before her, Emily inhaled sharply, the air thick with anticipation and her own self-doubt. The soft murmurs of the small audience seeped into her consciousness, amplifying the tension coiling within her. Each whisper felt like a reminder of the walls that enclose her, walls built by routine, by expectations, by the falseness of safety. Clara's words, vibrant and desperate, raced through Emily's mind. They served as both guide and challenge, urging her to confront her own Goliath. One step at a time, she edged toward the microphone, each footfall weighted with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The flickers of hope and fear danced in her heart, as potent as the flames flickering on the candelabras. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice shaky but resolute. She could see familiar faces, both friends and indifferent colleagues. They were the ones who had always deemed her merely the librarian, never recognizing the flicker of a creative spirit beneath layers of caution. Annoyed murmurs followed her, echoing Clara's experiences of belittlement. As she delved into Clara's story, the words flowed like water from a shimmering spring. Emily became Clara, woven into her trials the relentless class divide, the piercing betrayal of loyalty, the aspirations of a woman yearning for freedom amidst boundless chains. Each letter she read was a thread unraveling the cocoon that had imprisoned her for so long. She felt her own insecurities, those nagging fears of inadequacy, begin to dissipate as Clara's strength filled the air with undeniable coldness. The room's atmosphere thickened, charged with a synergy blooming from the shared struggle, a connection between past and present. Emily's nerves twisted and turned, yet she pressed forward, determined to unveil the years of silence, not only for Clara, but for herself. The narrative transformed her perception. She was no longer just a daughter, a librarian. She was a storyteller claiming her narrative space. But the deeper she ventured into Clara's tale, the louder her inner critic screamed. Would the audience truly grasp the gravity behind the ink-stained pages, or would they cast her aside like one of the forgotten volumes that lined the basement shelves? The stakes climbed higher. It was no longer just Clara's story. It was hers, too. In that moment of simmering clarity, a realization burst forth. This was her defining moment to break free. She would not allow the judgments of others to dictate her worth. With fresh resilience, Emily embraced the vulnerability palpable in the room, allowing Clara's spirit to guide her. As the last words escaped her lips, a profound silence enveloped the space, followed by a humming wave of applause. The sound was electric, coursing through her veins. It filled her with an energy she had long thought extinguished. She stood before the audience transformed, bathed in newfound courage, feeling as if she had leapt from the shadows into vibrant sunlight, and yet she hesitated, dread creeping back into her thoughts. Now that she had shared Clara's story, what lay ahead? The applause faded, but her journey was just beginning. How would she navigate the expectations of others now that the doors of possibility had started to creak open? Would her newfound voice reverberate within her daily life, or would it be smothered under the mundane? Emily stepped back from the mic, heart racing with exhilaration and fear. She understood that the journey she embarked on would require more than just courage. It would demand action, commitment, and perhaps even confrontation with those who doubted her. The choice loomed. Could she meld her passion with her everyday reality, or would she slip back into the shadows of silence once again? A sense of urgency pulsed within her. This was the moment to decide. Would she fight to sustain her voice beyond the confines of that library, or would she allow it to wither once more into forgotten corners of her heart? Emily turned, gazing into the sea of familiar faces there. Expressions reflected a mix of admiration and something else, an expectation of what was to come. The flickering light no longer terrified her. It beckoned, demanding she confront her fears head-on. Clarity washed over her, and as she stepped off the stage, the real challenge awaited. Would she confront her true self, or continue to live in a chapter of someone else's story? As Emily descended from the stage, the echoes of applause still resonating in her ears, she felt an unsettling blend of triumph and apprehension. The exhilaration of performing had unlatched a door she kept bolted for years, but now the reality of stepping into the light loomed ahead like an uncharted path. Her heart raced, not just with the thrill of recognition, but with the weight of the expectations poised to fall upon her. The audience was still abuzz with excitement, but Emily's mind spiraled into uncertainty. What would they expect her to be now? The librarian? The storyteller? Or something more? She recalled the lingering glances, the whispers that had shadowed her career. Self-doubt creeped in, warring with the craving for growth. She finally felt a flicker of her true identity igniting. Yet she had no map for this terrain that lay ahead. Walking back through the aisles, she was greeted by Mary, an older colleague whose praise had always felt safe. "You were brilliant, Emily." "Truly," Mary said, her eyes glistening with approval. Yet behind that praise was an undercurrent of something familiar. The expectation to revert to her role as the dutiful librarian, to keep Clara's story as an isolated incident rather than a catalyst for change. "Thank you, Mary," Emily replied, forcing a smile. It felt good to share." "Good," Mary responded, her tone slightly guarded. "Just remember to keep your feet on the ground and stick to what you know." Emily nodded, the pat on the back belying a subtle condescension. Was she destined to be the supportive librarian, quietly aiding others without stepping into the spotlight herself? She felt that familiar pull of retreat, a voice inside warning her to stay safe and small. But that voice was growing feebler, eclipsed by a burgeoning resolve that demanded recognition of her own desires. She could not allow herself to drown in other people's expectations. This was the moment for her voice to resonate beyond the shelves of the library. Each whisper from her colleagues served as both a challenge and a prompt to step further into her own narrative. As she made her way to the exit, Emily noticed Clara's book lying on the table where she had left it during her reading. She picked it up, running her fingers over the cover as if to summon Clara's spirit once more. What had Clara taught her about courage, about the necessity to fight for one's story? She had embraced her fierce determination to break free from confining barriers, and yet here Emily was teetering on the edge of commitment, still unsure. This realization honed her focus. It was time to confront the many Goliaths within her life, the doubts, the voices of others, and most importantly, her refusal to embrace her own aspirations. The journey ahead demanded not just a voice, but a plan and actionable strategy to dismantle the walls that defined her. Taking a deep breath, she felt the stirring of newfound clarity. She would need to schedule the time to write, to refine her storytelling craft, to seek opportunities that would force her out of her comfort zone. It wasn't enough to simply share Clara's story. She had to build her own. With every step toward the exit, Emily felt lighter, each resolved stride allowing her fears to diminish. Yet beneath the surface, tension brewed. Would her colleagues rally behind her as she took risks? Would Clara's courage translate into her own actions, propelling her into a world of creative possibilities? Just then, she spotted David, a colleague who had often underestimated her potential, leaning casually against the wall. His expression carried a hint of skepticism. "So what is next, Emily? Planning to do this all the time now?" He smirked, a challenge cloaked in jest. The interplay of tension surged anew. David's comment hung heavy. This was the moment, a direct confrontation that could shape her trajectory. Emily straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze with determination. "Actually, yes. I think it's time I start telling my own stories." The atmosphere crackled with unspoken potential and impending confrontation. David's expression shifted, curiosity flickering to life in his eyes. What would it take for her to truly own her narrative while dispelling the doubts of others? And more importantly, would she have the strength to pursue it despite opposition? The path ahead lay open, but she knew the real trial had only just begun. Would she rise to the occasion or collapse under the weight of skepticism? The glare of stage lights was slowly replaced by the muted glow of overhead fluorescence as Emily stepped into the library's quiet tranquility. The applause had faded into a distant memory, yet adrenaline still coursed through her. This sanctuary, once her refuge from the world, now felt constrictive, almost suffocating. Could she truly embark on the path she telegraphed to David? What if failure waited just around the corner? She settled into her favorite corner at the library, often designated for reflection. The scent of old books mingled with fresh ink as she pulled out a journal and pen. This time, she would not write about the tales of others, but rather craft her own narrative, a personal journey that entwined her past fears with her present resolve. The blank pages before her were both daunting and inviting, akin to the unknown she faced. As she began to scribble, thoughts spiraled into a plan. Emily intended to carve out time each day, setting deliberate moments to articulate her voice. But the starkness of her intentions raised questions. What stories waited to be unveiled? Would the real Emily emerge through reflective prose? She prodded the depths of her memory for anecdotal material, far more than just Clara's inspiration. But the shadows of skepticism loomed large. The image of David's smirk flashed before her. Would her colleagues notice the shift? Would Mary's well-meaning caution transform into active disdain if Emily chose to prioritize her narratives over library duties? Even as her excitement bubbled forth, a gnawing fear lay in wait, questioning the validity of her chosen pursuit. The stark contrast between daring and retreat tugged at her. Each time she picked up the pen, she grappling with an inner struggle to validate her narrative. Emily's fingers stilled as a revelation struck her experiences within the library offered untold insights. She had witnessed countless lives intertwine through the deluge of stories, absorbed the struggles of similar souls, and yet had not once attempted to weave her observations into something greater. This thought crystallized into an actionable vision. Her first story would not merely be personal. It would reflect the lives touched beneath the library's roof, the unheralded tales lost within the margins of forgotten pages. She envisioned a collection of beautifully interspersed vignettes illuminating her personal evolution while paying homage to the courage of others. Settling once more, she began brainstorming potential titles, crafting outlines in her mind for each distinct piece, each capture of her heart's essence. A sense of purpose rushed through her as she drafted compelling snippets reflecting the courage she gleaned from Clara and the residents she served. This newly developed voice wouldn't shrink into the background. Rather, it would blossom in vivid technicolor. Yet, even as creativity flowed, the weight of opinion still tugged at her conscience. What if she published openly? Readers would dissect her prose, searching for hidden meanings or flawed judgments. Would she be ready for that scrutiny? Each tale of her personal experiences bore traces of sensitivity she guarded fiercely. Vulnerability could become her greatest strength, or it might reduce her to mere fodder for disparagement. With that thought roaming freely, Emily paused, realization dawning. She had been waiting far too long for permission to be fully herself. The very essence of her stories, the trials of existence, was inherently worthy of exploration. As she concluded her writing session, a flash of recognition sparked within her. The discomfort was a necessary part of growth. The friction between fearing judgment and embracing authenticity could become a vital chapter in her journey. Yet, deep down, another question lingered. Would she be able to confront the skeptics like David who still lurked? Her heart raced at the thought of the impending pushback, but a fresh wave of determination washed over her. It was time to have those tough conversations and set boundaries. Emily gathered her belongings with resolve, taking the first steps toward reclaiming her narrative. The library, once a place of retreat, would now serve as the springboard for her new path. As she stepped back into the world beyond, a sense of clarity enveloped her. She was ready to step into the unknown. But amidst that clarity, one nagging uncertainty persisted. Could she actually hold her ground when the challenges came crashing in? Would she flounder or emerge even stronger? There was no turning back now. She was on the brink of a new saga, but twilight still held an air of mystery. What curiosities awaited her as the stories unfolded? And whom would she ultimately need to confront in her pursuit of truth? Emily stepped out of the library, the bustling streets greeting her with their familiar pulse. The chatter of pedestrians mixed with the hum of distant traffic, yet all she could hear was the thudding of her own heart. It matched the cadence of her thoughts as she wrestled with what lay ahead. The shift she recognized within herself, the need to weave the stories of others with her own, felt both thrilling and terrifying. With her newfound resolve, Emily set her sights on crafting the first piece. It would focus on Clara, the quirky, elderly woman who often spent afternoons in her favorite corner of the library, telling tales about the clandestine romances and forgotten histories of her youth. Clara's legacy of resilience resonated deeply within Emily, reflecting the struggles she herself faced. But how to capture Clara's essence in writing? It wasn't merely about the anecdotes, but also about the emotions tied to them. As she walked the familiar path to her favorite coffee shop, Emily contemplated how to express the delicate themes of vulnerability and courage intertwined with the stories emanating from the library. The scent of brewed coffee ushered her forward. The shop was a hub for creatives, yet the fear of judgment crept in. What if her words weren't enough? What if they fell into an abyss of indifference? Each doubt was a stone in her pocket, weighing her down as she ordered her drink. Settling at the back of the cafe, she spread her notes across the small table, reviewing snippets of Clara's past. A midlife affair? A chance encounter that changed the trajectory of her life? Each glimpse into Clara's experiences felt like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and yet Emily still struggled to see how it fit into her larger narrative. Staring into her coffee, she felt again the familiar pulse of skepticism. Each memory Clara shared echoed her own fears of inadequacy. What if, in attempting to validate Clara's story, she neglected to interlace her own struggles? Could she effectively portray that raw vulnerability, sharing her own narratives alongside the poignant glimpses into Clara's adventurous life? This was not merely about storytelling. It was about connection. The cafe buzzed around her, yet Emily felt like an island. Everyone else existed in their own realms, while she was tethered to her thoughts like a lifeline. A flicker of rage ignited. She despised the nagging voice which insisted on her inferiority. It was time to confront that voice, to challenge it head-on. With vigor, she drafted a plan. She would write not just Clara's experiences, but juxtapose them with her own discoveries of courage. Her pen glided across the paper, transforming self-doubt into proclamations of resilience. Each word was an affirmation that Clara's life was vibrant and worthy of expression, just as Emily's challenges were valid. In weaving these threads together, she was initiating a conversation about fear, about bravery, about the rawness of human emotion that lived within the library's books and its patrons. Emily glanced around the cafe, realizing people were immersed in their own stories, battling their unique fears. It was a revelation. Everyone had a narrative worth telling, including her. This understanding illuminated the path forward. She would not only write Clara's story, but also intertwine her voice within it, elevating both women as truths. As Clara's life resonated with authenticity, so could her own. Just then, the door swung open, and David strutted in, his presence overshadowing the light atmosphere. Emily's stomach twisted. The sudden jolt of anxiety scrunched her heart. Would he smirk at her efforts? Would he diminish her newfound passion, belittling the vulnerability she intended to divulge? Uncertainty enveloped her, but rather than retreating, she leaned into that discomfort. Emily began drafting her thoughts on the next page, determined to express the fragility of growth, regardless of external perceptions. She was not merely a library assistant caught in the expectations of others. She was a budding storyteller, ready to push against the constraints of her past. A flicker of determination lit up within her. As David approached her table with an inquisitive gaze, Emily caught her breath. It was time to confront him, to challenge the perceptions that shadowed her growth. This could be the moment that set the stage for her new beginning. Would she find the courage to share her ambitions directly with him, or would she retreat back into the shadows? Emily's heart raced as David neared her table, his confident stride drawing all attention to him. She wished for a barrier, anything to shield her from the scrutiny she feared. But the weight of her resolve pushed her forward. She wasn't going to hide today. Not anymore. "Hey, Emily," he said, a casual smile unfurling across his face as he slid into the seat opposite her. "What are you working on?" The question buzzed in the air, and she glanced at her notes, then back at David's expectant expression. Deep breaths. This was her moment, yet the urge to backpedal loomed large. Instead, she summoned the courage to confront her own discomfort. "I'm writing about stories," she replied, the words flowing more confidently than she felt. "About Clara, an older woman at the library. Her life is fascinating. She has seen so much, lived through trials that shaped her into who she is." David raised his eyebrows, clearly intrigued. "Sounds interesting. Is it just Clara, or are you adding your own experiences too? To give it depth?" His directness caught her off guard. The idea of intertwining her narrative with Clara's was the very essence of her plan, yet saying it aloud made her skin prickle. "I think both," she managed, her voice steadying. "Her resilience is inspiring, and I want to reflect that while exploring my own journey with fear and courage." "Wow, that's brave, Emily. You're putting yourself out there." David nodded, his expression shifting from skepticism to genuine interest. "What challenges you most about it?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer. Could she articulate the struggle of balancing her insecurities while crafting someone else's story? "I guess it's the fear of being vulnerable. What if people don't connect with it? Or if they don't find it meaningful? Isn't that a part of the process, though?" His gaze bore into hers, pressing her to dig deeper. "Every writer deals with fear. It's what makes stories relatable. The risk is what connects us all." Emily could feel herself peeling layers away, revealing the rawness beneath. "You really think that?" "Absolutely," he replied, leaning closer. "I mean, everything important worth sharing starts as a risk. It's how you grow. You can't let fear paralyze you. Who cares if some people don't resonate? What matters is the connection you make with those who do." His words danced like fire, igniting something in her that had languished for too long. Was she allowing the prospect of rejection to chain her voice? The realization surged within her a rush of clarity. Clara's stories were not just narratives. They were lifelines, and so was Emily's story. Unexpectedly, she felt lighter, her self-doubt lifting like mist. "Maybe you're right," she admitted, her tone shifting to one of determination. "I need to own my story as much as Clara's. It's more than just words on a page. It's me transforming my own fears into life lessons." David nodded in affirmation, his expression warming. "Exactly. Just remember, vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. You've got this." Their conversation energizing her, Emily felt a new chapter of her journey beginning right at that table. As the coffee shop bustled around them, she wondered why she had ever let fear loom over her aspirations. It was time to harness that fire, to wrestle her narrative into something profound that illuminated both her path and Clara's. But just as she began to explore the possibilities in her mind, David's phone chimed, pulling him momentarily back into the world outside their conversation. She watched as his attention split and felt a twinge of anxiety rise. Would he move on and leave her in a fog of self-doubt again? No, she couldn't let that happen. "David," she interjected before he could fully disengage. "What happens if you find that voice that you've been holding back? The one you talked about, the one that doesn't mind sharing its ups and downs?" He turned back to her, the question pooling in the air between them, an acknowledgement of the challenge ahead. "Who knows? But maybe it's time for both of us to find out." Emily's heart raced at the prospect of diving deeper into her content, of courageously laying bare the truths could resonate beyond herself. But could she ensure such revelations unfolded with authenticity? Would the choice to open herself up bring only freedom or the risk of further judgment? As she considered this, the realization that her story was just as valid as Clara's invigorated her. The pieces were aligned. Fear would no longer be a chain, but a driving force in her storytelling. Would she rise to embrace this vulnerability? Or would the fears claw back into her thoughts, overshadowing everything? In the remaining chaos of the cafe, Emily silently pondered the answer. Emily felt the warmth of the coffee shop around her dissipate as David returned his focus to his phone. The sudden shift in his attention was jarring, and she fought to keep her thoughts from spiraling back into insecurity. She had just cultivated a sense of agency over her story, but this emotional resurgence felt precarious. She stared at her notes, tracing the words with her finger, trying to ground herself in the plan she had started to form. The idea of merging her personal narrative with Clara's stories unfolded in her mind like an intricate tapestry. But for every thread she contemplated weaving in, the voices of self-doubt whispered warnings. What if her childhood failures in expressing herself emerged in her writing, crippling her efforts? What if she failed not just Clara, but also her own story? No more distractions, she muttered under her breath, reigniting determination. For every fear that mounted, she also began to recognize a hidden resourcefulness within her, the ability to turn difficulty into narrative, transformation into triumph. She had spent countless hours observing Clara the way she animated stories with her laughter, the tear tracks etched during heavier recollections. Emily decided that it was time to harness that same vibrant honesty when she faced her own past. "David?" She interrupted again, this time with an urgency that surprised her. "I think I need to confront my past. You said vulnerability is a strength, and if that's true, maybe it's time I connect my history with the present." His gaze met hers, curious and attentive. "Are you thinking of writing about your own experiences then, not just Clara's?" "Yes." She now felt her voice resonate with newfound conviction. "I can't run away from the parts of myself that wrinkle under vulnerability. By connecting my struggles with hers, I can emphasize the strength that comes from facing fears. That juxtaposition could create depth and resonance." David nodded thoughtfully, encouraging her vocal exploration of her ideas. "That sounds powerful, but what past moments are you willing to share? Can you be honest with yourself?" Inhaling deeply, Emily thought of her childhood, the unread letters left under her bed that captured stories she never dared to tell. Each represents the quieter moments where she wished she could scream into a crowded room, but instead turned inward, hiding her aspirations. Staring intently at her notes, she felt the knots in her stomach loosen slightly as she prepared to name the fear that had governed her. "I've chosen to hide behind my writing, to let my voice fade into the background. I've held back because I thought silence was safer than risk. What does that say about me?" The question felt like an incantation, a subconscious opening of wounds long kept shielded. "Emily," David interjected softly, "if you're willing to explore those feelings, what you'll reveal can be freeing. Acknowledge your pain and the sources of your fear. Transforming your narrative could be a step toward healing." His insight ignited a flicker of liberation within her, a moment of clarity that overpowered any lingering anxiety. This wasn't merely an exercise in storytelling, but a deeply personal excavation into her psyche. The moments that frightened her might form the crux of her tale, allowing others to identify with her journey. Emily reframed her surroundings within the cafe, noticing the mingled scents of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods as they merged with her creativity. Each sound, each movement around her sparked an internal rebranding. She would not shy away. But as the gravity of her decision descended, so did another prick of doubt. Was she really ready to reveal her deepest fears, and could she withstand the vulnerability that would ensue? The doubt lingered like an echo, curling inward as she visualized herself standing before an audience, her heart bared and trembling. She glanced at David, whose earlier encouragement had kindled a sense of bravery. "What if I face backlash? What if I pour my heart out and no one connects?" she asked, her voice laced with trepidation. "Then you learn," he said, his expression calm and steady. "But keeping it locked away stunts your growth. It's your life, your story, claim it." Emily felt the weight of the choice solidifying. She wouldn't allow her voice to remain muffled any longer. Determination surged anew inside her, but beneath it lay the unsettling question that lingered like an unyielding specter. Could she build the fortitude to endure the spotlight, should it shine bright upon her truths? A bell chimed above the door, drawing her eyes as a newcomer entered, shifting the energy in the cafe once more. Would she remain fixed to her resolve, or would the uncertainties force a retreat once again? The bustling ambience around them continued to pulse, vibrant and alive, while she braced herself for the moment she had been both craving and fearing. Emily felt the tension swirling around her like a tempest, a blend of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. The newcomer's entrance had momentarily disrupted her focus, but her resolve sat heavier now, anchored in her gut. If she were to embark on this journey of vulnerability, all her fears would have to be faced head-on. The cafe buzzed with chatter, the barista calling out drink orders while a couple engaged in animated conversation at a nearby table. Emily observed them through the haze of her own thoughts. Each laughter, each shared glance, built upon her growing understanding that stories thrived in connection and offering of oneself, naked and unfiltered. But how much of herself was she willing to share? She returned her gaze to her notes, the inked words reflecting a potential that felt both empowering and petrifying. What was it that made vulnerability excruciating yet beautiful? Perhaps it was the fear of judgment paired with the thrill of making real, deep connections. The dichotomy fascinated her, and she began to feel the seed of transformation germinating within. Think about what you want your audience to take away. David's voice broke through her reverie. His presence felt steady, a reminder that she was not so alone in this endeavor. Is it inspiration? Relatability? Healing? Emily took a moment, contemplating the direction she wished to steer. I want them to see that fear is a shared experience, that we all possess parts of ourselves we hide away, but it's essential to bring them to light. A small light flickered in her chest, a warmth spreading through her core as she tapped into that communal thread of humanity. The more she thought about her own struggles, the clearer they became. The notion of writing about her childhood felt less like an admission of failure and more like an act of bravery. Yet, what experiences would she prioritize? Which narratives would carve their way forward? Maybe I start from that moment when I first felt invisible. She reflected aloud, her voice steadying with each word. I remember the school talent show I wanted to perform, but instead I just sat backstage, listening to everyone else shine. That moment led to years of hesitation in sharing any of my own talents. David nodded, a smile lifting the corners of his mouth, showing approval and respect for her willingness to dig deeper. And how can you turn that experience into something meaningful in your writing? What if I explore how that fear of being unseen evolved? How it influenced my relationships, my choices? Emily's excitement began to punctuate her voice. I could frame that as a catalyst for transformation. How often do we hide our stories to fit in? The realization was electric. Her past didn't define her. It fueled her narrative. Yes, there would be fear in bearing her wounds, but also the prospect of forging connections with those who had experienced similar pain. She felt herself shifting, each realization sparking embers of confidence within her. Putting pen to paper would be an act of reclamation not just of her voice, but of her entire story. That talent show had been a defining moment, one that could lead others through their own traumas toward healing. As she looked up, intending to share this newfound clarity with David, a wave of anxiety rushed back. The prospect of exposing her truth still loomed like a storm cloud. But what if I don't get it right? What if I open old wounds that are better left untouched? David's gaze softened. Mistakes are part of the process, Emily. What matters more than perfection is authenticity. You are writing a memoir of your journey. Your imperfections make it real, relatable. A sense of calm washed over her within the chaos of her thoughts. She wouldn't be delivering a perfect manuscript, but rather an honest reflection of her journey. With a deep breath, she took the leap into tangible action, opening a fresh page in her notebook, ready to write. Words began to flow, light and shadow intertwining in an intricate dance. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a nagging voice whispered its doubts, reminding her of the painful moments she would need to embrace. As she penned the beginning of her truth, she knew the path ahead would challenge her resolve and resilience. Would she manage to confront the ghosts of her past, and in doing so, transform her fears into fuel? Emily paused, the pen hovering above the paper. A chill ran down her spine, not merely out of fear but anticipation, as if she were standing on the brink of a transformative experience. The ink would dive into the depths of her soul, unearthing truths buried too long. Outside, the clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the tempest within her, leaving Emily to wonder if she was truly prepared for whatever emotional storm would follow. The pen finally descended onto the page, its tip a beacon of her emerging voice. As the first sentences formed, Emily felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. Each word seemed to urge her to dig deeper, pushing against the barriers she had placed around her past. She was surprised at how quickly the memories flowed, vivid snapshots of her childhood flickering behind her eyes like an old film reel. The recollections of that day at the talent show flooded in, and she described the excitement entwined with her fear, how she had longed to feel the spotlight on her face only to fall into the shadows. In that moment, the warmth of nostalgia fueled her sentences, but it was the undercurrent of pain that made her heart race. Despite the therapeutic power of writing, the act was not without its dangers. Each line she penned threatened to unearth emotions she had buried deep. The cafe atmosphere buzzed around her, but Emily was oblivious to its flow. She was in a world of her own, a place where the past was sculpted into fragile words that told her story. Her fingers raced across the pages, mapping out her journey from an invisible girl to one who yearned to be seen. An unexpected wave of self-doubt gripped her. What if sharing these moments opened floodgates too wide to manage? Her childhood experiences were fraught with scars, and reliving them felt like flirting with devastation. Yet, she was learning that every powerful story carried the weight of pain and resilience. To achieve that connection she craved, she would need to embrace all of it. For a brief moment, her gaze wandered back to David. He was still immersed in his own writing, his focus unwavering. Was he aware of the struggle raging inside her? Did he know how much it cost her to spill out her humanity onto a page? Suddenly, his presence felt more anchoring than intimidating. He was a constant reminder that vulnerability could breed strength. She turned back to her notebook, breathed deeply, and wrote about the allies she found along the way, the friends who reminded her of her worth, the mentors who believed in her when she faltered. They had played a pivotal role in shaping her journey, and their influence deserved to be celebrated. In weaving their stories into her narrative, Emily did something transformative. She reclaimed her voice not only as a storyteller, but as someone who had long been silenced. With each word, she was no longer merely recounting her life. She was elevating her experiences into a shared saga of hope and healing. Yet, amidst this evolving narrative, new shadows began to creep, and the fear of external judgment loomed heavy. What would others think when she unwrapped the complexities of her insecurities? Would they find her cringeworthy or brave? Her insecurities raged at the forefront of her thoughts, warring against her deeper resolve to embrace authenticity. It was a tenuous tightrope she found herself walking, one where her vulnerability bumped against the expectation of societal approval. As much as she wished to embrace her truth, it would mean confronting her fear of rejection. Suddenly, for the first time, Emily felt the urgency of her quest sharpen. She could already envision the contours of her story, an amalgam of courage, doubt, and inevitability. But concerns remained. The path to truth did not run parallel to ease, especially not with her past lurking like ghosts in the background. With a tremor in her hand, she hesitated, the pen hovering above the page once more. Could she bear to expose the depths of her soul? Would she find empowerment, or would the act of unsealing old wounds serve only to engulf her in a crowd of harsh critics? The cafe light dimmed as a storm rumbled outside, an echo of her internal uncertainties. Emily clenched her jaw, ready to confront the ever-growing storm within. The moment was ripe for revelation. She would have to dig even deeper, push through the initial barriers. She took a breath, lowering the pen again, not just to continue her writing, but to plunge into a deeper confrontation with her past. She knew the road ahead would challenge her resilience beyond measure. Was she prepared to pull the bandage off old scars in pursuit of authenticity? An electric anticipation quivered in the air. Something within her whispered to keep writing, to strip away her protective layers and lay herself bare. As thunder crackled ominously outside, she acknowledged that what lay ahead was the test of a lifetime, a confrontation not only of her past, but also her potential to embrace who she might become. Embarking on this journey would either shatter the calm or create a mosaic from the shards. And as she prepared to write the next chapter, a question loomed. Was she truly ready to face not only her fears, but also the potential for a brighter, more interconnected future? Emily Carson found herself at an unusual intersection as she stood at the library's entrance, the weight of her choices palpable in the air. The cries of the storm outside seemed to mimic the chaotic symphony within her as she confronted the reality of her new identity. No longer just a librarian absorbed in the routines of quiet existence. She was now a storyteller, one who had invited the powerful voices of her past to dance alongside her in the present. Hours passed since she last sat at the cafe, weaving her story with active contemplation. The moment of triumph she once dreaded, the vulnerability of sharing her narrative, now glimmered with promise and a renewed determination. Emily had faced personal demons and silenced critics with the ink of her pen. Her reflections on Clara's struggles had merged seamlessly with her own, outlining a narrative rich in authenticity and connection. The applause from the reading night echoed in her mind, a continuous reminder of the impact her words had harbored. People had resonated with her. Strangers with their own tales of resilience approached her afterward, sharing how they saw snippets of their own lives reflected in Clara and Emily alike. Each encounter had reinforced her belief that vulnerability fosters unity, allowing her to fine-tune her path ahead. With resolve, she committed to a multitude of goals that stretched beyond mere storytelling. Emily had desired to carve out her own space and presence, staging public readings across the community and even contributing to local publications. They would be not just expressions of her journey, but platforms for others similarly lost in silence. Fueled by purpose, she made an impromptu decision to host a reading at the library. It would be an opportunity to elevate the voices of others as she had been uplifted. She envisioned sharing her experiences alongside excerpts from Clara's letters, while inviting unsuspecting patrons to join her journey of reclamation. As the weeks passed, the community reading materialized, transforming from a mere concept into reality. Emily stood at the podium, the familiar buzz of excitement and nerves swirling around her. This time it felt different. The tension dwindled, replaced with solid confidence. Tonight, she announced, her voice steady and clear, we reclaim our stories, the ones that haunt our thoughts and thankless moments of courage. Each word resonated, drawing the audience into a collective embrace as she divulged Clara's reflections interlaced with her own. The sea of faces absorbed her narrative, their attentiveness heartening her as she soared through the complexities of vulnerability and the strength that arose from it. The initial desires to hide behind the librarian facade melted away, revealing a mastery of her craft, a new Emily emerging, anchored yet unshackled. As she concluded, the room thrummed with a crescendo of applause, filling her with deep satisfaction. Emily recognized that her triumph wasn't merely limited to the story shared. It extended to the impactful growth that radiated from her. It was the affirmation she needed. She had conquered doubt, confounding it with the light of self-acceptance. Later, audience members began to voice their experiences, a symphony of shared struggles that cascaded around her. A tapestry of vulnerability connected them, And Emily knew she had created something profound, a sanctuary for others finding the courage to share their stories. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's participation in local writing groups and workshops flourished. She established a blogging platform, inviting others to share their narratives while offering her own reflections. Emily had transcended from the shadows of uncertainty now. She radiated a confidence founded on authenticity and connection. Transitioning from insecurity to recognized competence wasn't just a professional transformation. It was a personal evolution woven with the threads of earlier struggles. Her journey personified not only an escape from silence, but an avowal of the richness found in shared vulnerability. As she reveled in the gathered momentum, Emily understood that recognition was no longer merely about external validation. She relished the growing sense of fulfillment and pride as each letter typed unlocked further potential. With new stories emerging from everyday encounters, she crafted a compelling anthology that expertly juxtaposed her awakening alongside Clara's. This anthology became more than a collection of essays. It burgeoned into a powerful dialogue about fear, resilience, and the invisible strings connecting people through shared experiences. Emily's confidence solidified into embodiment. She was now an author, an advocate for authenticity, and above all, an illuminated voice beckoning others to venture into their own narratives. Through concrete achievements, she had not only built a reputation as a storyteller, but a community of shared voices, unearthing the stories silenced by fear. One unassuming afternoon, as she smiled at a stack of her published works, Emily saw the world unfold before her, ripe with promise. This was her achievement, a testimony of transformation from the hidden servant of life's narrative to a beacon illuminating the significance of every story. No longer afraid to navigate the chaos of expectations, Emily Carson had become a thriving embodiment of resilience, a living testament that by sharing our journeys, we forge a connection through the crucible of life, illuminating the beauty of the experiences that bind us. Now, dear viewers, it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to act. Let us make these stories resonate. You need to support the channel now. Don't wait even one more second to share.